Hello, everyone. My name is Michael DeSouza. I am a member at large, Actors Equity. I'm here to, I guess, moderate the second of our constitutional convention, kind of like a fireside chat, getting a chance to talk about the different uh, amendments, proposals that are going to be coming before the voting delegates at the council. And since it's a very short time frame, we want to give the members time to actually ask very in-depth questions now and get an idea ahead of the actual convention, which is next week, I believe.
Convention is in another 2.5 weeks.
2.5 weeks. Okay. Time is irrelevant, right? At this point. Like I said, I'm Michael DeSouza, and if everyone pronouns he, him, everyone can kind of go around and introduce themselves and their positions.
I'll go next. I'm Ruth Eitmiller. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a Western Stage Management Delegate based out of Seattle.
I'm Robert Ariza. I use he, him pronouns, and I am an Eastern Chorus Delegate.
Hi, Myron Morales. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm an Eastern Principal Delegate.
Hi, I'm Carla Martinez. I am an Eastern Principal Delegate, and I am in New York, New York.
Hi, I'm Nancy Anderson. I'm an Eastern Principal Delegate, and I'm in Stanton, Virginia, in the Shenandoah Valley.
Great. Thank you all for that. Let's have Robert. Would you like to read the mission statement of the Transparency Council?
I would love to. The Transparency Coalition is a group of non-councilor delegates of Actors Equity Association dedicated to leadership and communication that is truly representative of our union's members. We're bringing the discussion of convention resolutions and amendments directly to members through a series of live discussions on Facebook and YouTube, allowing members to ask questions and express their support or concerns in real time. Each discussion is moderated by a non-delegate union member who will serve as an important voice of the membership. We will always strive to foster an inclusive, respectful, safe, and brave space to discuss ideas and continue learning. Our values are collaboration, curiosity, and yes-anding of one another, proposed policy, and the questions and concerns of membership. We are committed to creating an environment that is rooted in respect so that we can productively create and sustain this brave space, safe space to discuss complicated issues. We will always extend that respect to members watching, and we seek the same in return. What we ask is that both the members engaging in conversation with us and the delegates themselves hold these two agreements. 1, speak from the I. 2, confront confusion or discomfort with curious questions. And while we are happy to engage in constructive debate, we view harassment and discrimination as a clear threat to free expression and participants' safety, and as such, they will not be tolerated. We ask that the members who engage with us give us the grace to not always know or to get it wrong sometimes. Anytime we don't know the answer to a question, we recognize it as an opportunity to search for information or clarity. I don't know are 3 of the most powerful words there are, followed closely by, let me find out. We bring you this series of convention conversations not only to have meaningful dialogue with current and future members, but to learn more ourselves about the important policies of our union and to enhance our ability to serve as trusted liaisons for our fellow union members.
Great, thank you so much. Before we dive in on the first amendment, I just want to remind everyone watching that the chat is open. So if you have any questions, please feel free to hit that up and we will get to them when we kind of circle around and finish up talking about the specific amendments. The first amendment is reinstating the special membership meetings. In the background, previously membership could decide to call a special membership meeting at any time, so long as they received at least 250 votes of support. This was one of the few actionable rights for rank and file members in the bylaws. Council recently voted to remove this bylaw provision. Currently, the Constitution states that after 2021, regularly scheduled membership meetings will only be held every other year in the non-convention years. And kind of to that point, do we know, since we will be doing 2 back-to-back conventions, if that applies for next year as well, since there will be a convention?
I think it's normal until after next year.
Okay.
So I think they're still planning on being meetings this year, next year, and then the following year. Don't quote me on that, but I think what it is like 2 years from next year is when there won't be meetings. So it's like looking forward into the future. But right now, there's a bit of a transition period.
Okay. On convention years. The resolution seeks to reinstate the rule allowing members to call a special membership meeting, a change that required 300 votes, and prevent council from removing this rule without consulting membership at large. The delegate that did propose this is with us tonight, Robert, and I will give you the floor to kind of speak a little bit more about it and your impetus for putting it forward.
Sure. So I first learned about special membership meetings back in September. I had never heard of them before. I didn't know that was, at that point, I really didn't have much experience with our constitution and our bylaws. And I had just been elected as one of our new delegates. But I was in conversation with a counselor who I think I posed a question in Slack, the platform that we've been using to discuss with the delegates, about whether or not we could, like, members could compel a membership meeting if they felt like there was something that they needed to discuss in certain times, obviously like a pandemic, instead of having to wait for the scheduled membership meetings that are already provided. And he wrote back saying that actually used to be this provision called the special membership meeting, and that it was kind of being discussed at some point about raising the number of votes needed to compel the meeting from 250 to something higher, because they were concerned, from what I understand, about the financial aspect of creating these meetings. And apparently they are very costly. I don't know what exactly the costs are, but the reason that they were thinking about taking this provision off in the first place was for financial reasons. And they were afraid that 250 was too low of a threshold, that members could take advantage of this provision and it would be very costly to the union. Ultimately, I think in conjunction with voting up the convention, they ended up removing this provision. And I don't remember ever reading anything about it. I don't think anyone really was notified about it in any way. So it kind of was like swept under the rug. It felt like when I found out about this information, that really bugged me, obviously, because I was like, as I was starting to learn more about the Constitution and bylaws, I was like, there really isn't a lot that the rank and file members can do that are, any actionable things that they can really do. A lot of it, a lot of what happens within our union takes place in our council rooms. And, many people will say, well, council is elected by the membership, so, they speak for the members. But I think we can all say that not all members feel like they're always best represented by the governance of our union. So when it came time to start creating the proposals to submit for the convention, I was so distracted with all the other amazing proposals and resolutions that had been talked about for months, that I had forgotten about this provision. And it struck me as I was signing proposals to go to convention that I was like, oh, actually, there is something that I can add to this conversation, and something that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about. And so I quickly wrote it up, because I think we only had a couple days left before the signatures had to be confirmed on the portal that the delegates were using. And it was a little slow at first to garner some attention from our fellow delegates. And so I had to start lobbying, and I employed some of my friends to help me lobby. And luckily we got to the threshold that was needed, because for constitutional amendments, instead of resolutions, it required more signatures, as it also will require more votes should the proposal, or when the amendment goes to convention.
I believe it's 2/3, right, for a constitutional amendment.
That's right, 2/3. In which case, for the signatures, it was 42 votes as opposed to 21. Yeah.
I have a question. What incurs the costs for such a meeting, and is that something that would go away if we were now that we have virtual meetings? Like, was it a cost incurred because of renting a space and was it more brick and mortar expenses, or? I think
That's my assumption. I actually don't know for sure. I do think that that's a good point, and that's something that I have talked about with other people too, that now that we have this virtual option that is obviously so convenient for so many people now, it shouldn't really be too much of a problem to create these meetings. And actually, when I was drafting the proposal, I raised the number of votes needed from 250 to 300 members to compel the meeting, to kind of assuage whoever may have voted the provision down in the first place, that it's not something that members would take advantage of. I mean, the first time that this was, or the last time that this membership meeting was used was back in 2014, I believe, and it hasn't been used since. So I find it interesting that the 1 year where we have a pandemic, and it probably would have been used, such as the town hall that was kind of demanded by the members this afternoon, right? I think it would have been something that would have been useful for us to have.
I wonder too, like to what Nancy's talking about, because my fear about this is that it would remain as it had been, reinstating an old policy that wasn't working because it was exclusive to office cities. My understanding is that whenever they would call one of these, they'd have a meeting in each office city, and that was it. So then we're excluding all the people outside of office cities through these meetings. And so my question, I don't know if any of us have the answer to this, but I would love to know is, in reinstating this, are we able to have forward moving policy and actually have it be virtual and be able to have the town hall we just had, and anyone anywhere can come to this? It also means that they would only need to hold one. They wouldn't need to hold three. It would be less staff time. It would be more accessible. And I think it might actually accomplish what it's doing. My only concern is if in reinstating old policy, that means we get all the baggage that came with it. Because as I feel like we know, like our organization, our union doesn't like to change. It doesn't like to innovate on something that's existed before. It feels like oftentimes we have to replace something to really innovate. And so I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if any of us know the answer to that, but that's like both my concern and my hope, if that makes any sense.
So do you mean like in specific language for reinstating this, should it be reinstated that they include that it can be a virtual meeting, that it doesn't have to be a meeting that is in person?
Yeah, and I almost like the idea that it should only be virtual, right? Because if the members can request an in-person, like if it's a New York centric group that's requesting this meeting, they could request an in-person, because then they get to be in person and it's more accessible for a select group. I almost think we serve the greater membership better by them being required to be virtual or be able to be virtually attended, because then it gets rid of some of the cost factor, and it creates a wider range of people who can attend, right? Like more voice is what we all ultimately want.
Well, I guess I would say that my concern then is that if it gets reinstated, that they wouldn't assume that it could be virtual, that it has to be written into the Constitution, because that's the problem, right? Is that now, I mean, the Resolutions Committee is still looking at these proposals, and they haven't reached out to me for any kind of improvement in the language or more specificity or anything like that, which I actually expected, because there was a counselor on one of the Facebook groups who did not add his signature when I was lobbying for it. And he said, "Oh, I really think that this is a good idea. I just think some of the language is not right." I was like, "Great, sign it so that it can, you're on the committee that reviews it, so that you could then give me the feedback that you want to give me, and I'll make it better." And I haven't received that feedback, and who knows if I will. But I guess that's my concern, is that in reinstating it, that they would be very narrow with their idea of what a meeting is. Like, I think that we can just have an understanding, now that we know that meetings can be virtual and have been virtual this past year, that they should just be able to be virtual. It doesn't have to be specifically stated in the language.
Well, I think the thing that you might have the best thing going for you is that we are holding a virtual convention. It wasn't supposed to be like this, but it is. So you kind of maybe use that language when you are talking or presenting that when it's on the floor. I think that could be effective.
That's a good point.
I think reinstating some version of it is a really good idea, because the whole point of this delegation and the kind of work that we're doing is to bring more voices into the room and to make sure that members feel empowered, because this is a union that, I've been in the union for almost 30 years, and the feeling of empowerment among members has never been higher than it is now, and I think that it eroded over the past decades, where we were giving somebody else the responsibility to run our union, and I think that the more that we can tell ourselves this is our union and we can make the rules for our union, the better. So I think that any kind of meetings that we can have, particularly virtual, are going to be only for the best.
Absolutely. And again, sorry, I forgot to mention this before. My concern then is that at the convention, the language is not allowed to change for any of the resolutions or amendments. So while we could have a discussion and say, hey, it would be better if we did this, we can't actually change it at that point.
To that point, though, I think it's a larger topic, right? It's not just about these meetings. It's about all membership meetings. Right?
That's true.
It's not just these specially called ones. As someone who doesn't live in an office city, the first time I was ever able to attend a membership meeting was once they went virtual.
Wow.
So I would hope that it becomes a policy across the board and not just for this specific amendment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I echo what Ruth said. I lived in New England for most of my professional career up until recently when I moved to New York, and we had the occasional Boston membership meeting, but it wasn't to the extent that it should have been, especially when you have people like getting their cards and the only information that they can get specifically from the union is like the Eastern membership meeting, which up until recently was an in-person thing. So if you couldn't get down to New York for this like 1 hour meeting, you completely missed a lot of what was happening and a lot of the decisions that were being made. And it's for them to say like, to have this convention and have all of us delegates like brought in from all over the place, but not supplement that with resources, like it would just, it's pointless. It's a moot point,
Right.
And even in the office cities, I know I've been to meetings in New York in the past where it was so crowded and so overpacked that they had to have an offshoot of a room. So I think this could be a good way to get more people involved, even alleviating some of that congestion that we have in the cities. All right. Any more questions on this amendment, or?
I'm just really glad that you decided to submit this proposal, Robert. I really think it's sort of at the core of all of these other resolutions have less power without this one, which is empowering every single member that we can.
I appreciate that. Hopefully we can, get the votes that we need at convention.
Great. Ryan?
I'm trying to find this, and maybe I fabricated this in my brain. Isn't there a resolution to open up our meetings and make them like virtual to continue the precedent we've set of having virtual meetings? Did I make that up in my brain, or is that I'm literally going through the resolutions right now trying to find it to like.
Gosh, I wish I could recall that, but out of 153 proposals or whatever it is, it's not coming to my mind.
I don't remember either that specific one.
I don't see it, but even just part of these meetings is being able to flag things for next year. It makes me wonder if it might be beneficial for us to have a resolution next year that because it's a pretty nice wide sweeping thing that all meetings should be attendable virtual. Like
I think that's the answer, Ryan. That's absolutely right. Let's put that on for next year if it's not on this year, for sure.
Yeah, because that would umbrella all of this in, I think, in a really meaningful way. But I want to highlight, to say a second thing, sorry, to highlight what Michael said. I wonder what the language is. Like if we got nerdy and looked at the language for the convention, if it anywhere in there said that the convention could be virtual at all, or if the language in the convention thing is the same as or similar to the language in reinstating the special membership meetings, and we could point at it and say, hey, there's precedent here that just when it says meetings, we've always interpreted that as in person, but if there's nothing in the language that implies it has to be in person, maybe this can pass as is. The language doesn't have to change, and we can just acknowledge as a convention or acknowledge that it doesn't have to be in person, and in fact there's a lot of benefits to it being virtual, and so etc. And then we could always amend it next year if we wanted to being only virtual to fix up some of the holes, but it could potentially be a way to sell this so that it passes for this year and we can make it even better next year. You know what I mean? Like,
well, also, I don't even think we have to. I think we can pass it the way that it is now. And if they wanted to amend the language, I don't think they have to wait till next year, right? Council can vote to do that in the meeting.
Can council amend the Constitution?
I thought that was how it was done before convention, but is it now changed because of convention?
I think they have to do referendums to edit the Constitution, which is what they did when they removed this and put the convention in. So the convention is an easier place to amend the Constitution than a referendum.
Gotcha.
I think that's the catch, is anything we make an amendment on, it's there till we adjust it later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, in which case it's still better to have it there so that we can then just make the fix as opposed to not having it at all.
Great. All right, let's move on to number 2. The constitutional amendment is to eliminate barriers to the convention participation. The background for this, currently in order to run for a delegate position, you have to be at least 18 years old, a member in good standing, not be in conflicted interest. Conflict of interest means a member who also has hiring and or firing power over other members, and meet certain employment category qualifications. These employment qualifications are that you must have worked at least 2 contracts under the applicable category, either a principal contract, chorus, or stage management contract, or 1 contract that was longer than 10 weeks. These employment qualifications apply to all council and governance positions as well. This resolution seeks to remove the employment qualifications and allow any member in good standing and not in conflict of interest, regardless of their work history, to participate in the convention. I will open this up to the floor.
I think the work requirements are minimal and achievable, and I think that it's my opinion is that it's very important to have the people who are working these contracts to be the people in the room. When you have people who are out of work for extended periods of time, I'm not sure that helps keep us up to date on what's happening on the contracts at the time. But it's my opinion.
Can I pose a question?
Yes.
Because I think I know what the answer to this is, but I'm curious what other people think the answer is. What is this seeking to solve? What problem is this seeking to solve?
I'm assuming is that it's to widen the net so that more people can be involved in governance, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I also think it's really interesting too. When I first ran for the position, I was wondering what the difference was between the principal and the chorus role, because now that we're in it, there's not really a huge difference. It's not like, yeah, it's not like the principals are only focused on, we're not even on contracts. Like, we don't even talk about contracts. So, now that we're in it, it's not like the chorus ones are specific to only chorus issues. So that, yeah, I think that there could have been, I think this could be reworked, because it does. I mean, if you haven't, worked a specific contract, there's no way that you can, unless you join a committee. But I mean, in this specific situation, there's no way that you can actually be a part of the conversation if you haven't worked these specific contracts.
Well, and the delineation between chorus and principal is so, it used to be such a division in our workforce. And now there virtually is no division there, in that so many of our shows, everybody, even if you're on a pink contract or a white contract or whatever, we don't have the singers chorus and the dancers chorus and the principals anymore. It's a whole different structure, that the way that we do musicals, which is of course where this language came from. I wonder if even the language is starting to get outmoded, because so many people are jack of all trades. Everybody's, having to be ensemble and be dancers and be musicians and be everything else,
Well, also, I feel like there are many people who do both. Like, I have done many principal contracts and many chorus contracts. So, yeah.
And in terms of broadening it out and getting more participation, I feel like if you think about the barriers to entry into the union, it would fall under one of those two contracts most likely. So a lot of people who are just basic union members have already fulfilled one of those requirements for one or the other. That's maybe an overgeneralization, but it probably covers a good portion of membership.
It would be interesting to truly understand what problem this is solving, because it may be that there are people who are concerned about, maybe they haven't worked a contract in a few years, but they're still a member of the union and they want to have a say. And so maybe that's, I think that gets us on a slippery slope of people who end up becoming professional, elected leaders of the union when they're not working the contracts.
I have a couple thoughts to throw in. First, there's no time reference in this, right? It's just that at some point in your time as a member, you have worked at least 2 contracts under that category. So you could have not worked for 10 years, but you worked 2 contracts ages ago, you would still qualify. I think, Michael, you make a great point about if you are a member, then likely you have at least worked 1 contract under that. But also, as the only stage manager on this call, I will speak to that aspect of it, and a conversation I had with a couple other stage managers about, if we remove this, then what prevents someone who's never stage managed from running as a stage manager delegate? You're then dependent on the people who are voting in that region to be like, oh, this person has no credits as a stage manager. I'm not going to vote for them. I'm going to vote for this other person. But that is then reliant on the membership at large recognizing that in their voting. Or a stage manager, the opposite way, a stage manager running for a principal position. Yes, we know the rules. We all are familiar to some extent with each other, but I shouldn't be representing principals. I don't know the ins and outs of that contract. So that's my pushback on this.
That's a good point.
That makes a lot of sense.
I guess just to take it from like a different perspective, maybe this amendment isn't necessarily tailored to council as a whole, but maybe it's a comment on the roles within the convention, that maybe they want it to be a little bit more well-defined in terms of people who are on a principal should have a little bit more responsibility dealing with principal contracts, and people who are stage managers dealing a little bit more with that.
Yeah, and this amendment only seeks to change these requirements for delegates. It's not addressing changing these requirements for council members. And I think the argument behind it is that if we're eliminating or really cutting down on membership meetings and people's ability to participate there, then they should at least be able to participate in governance at the convention.
There's something about this, though, that, because I'm looking just to get nerdy about the exact language, the exact definition of, I'm going to actually read the language just because I think it's important in this conversation. Each region, this is in our Constitution, like anyone can read this. It says that each region shall conduct its delegate election so that all employment categories, principal, course, and stage manager, are represented proportionate to the members in good standing in those employment categories in each region. And the new one, and there's a little bit more, but just with this piece, and the new one would just say, any one member who's in good standing shall be eligible to be a delegate. So when this inadvertently change that there has to be proportionate representation as well as one piece of this? It removes the mandate that there be proportionate representation based on job category. Am I reading that wrong?
I think you just read the section that says it's going to be amended to. You just read what they want it to
amended
say.
to read. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
No longer.
Yeah, so I think that's what they want it to read.
Right.
What did it read before?
All it's removing is the employment qualifications.
Okay, don't listen to me.
So the new language would still keep the representation according to categories,
but not according to whether you've worked the contracts.
right?
So in that case, the wording says that a stage manager can't be like a person who's not a stage manager can't do a stage manager.
Can't run for a stage manager delegate position.
I don't know. It would be interesting to find out what the what this amendment is asking for specifically. What experiences? I mean, I think that we should find that out, since all of us are a little bit fuzzy on what problem it solves. It might be great to find that out, and at another meeting we can double back and say, oh, we found out. That the person who wrote this really is concerned about this specific issue. I think that would be worth doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is why it's so important to have different representation in these meetings with, like, not just like all Eastern actor delegates, but to have different regions represented in different, and have stage managers part of this conversation, because that's something I wouldn't have thought about.
Same.
Let's get some love for our stage managers out there.
Woo-hoo!
All right. I'm okay to move on to number 3 if y'all feel like we've discussed that in depth.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I would just say before we come back to this, whenever we come back to this, like, I'm trying to compare it now to the actual Constitution, and that's where it gets fuzzier. Like, I get what the title of this says it's doing, and I'm confused about if what the title of it says it's doing is actually what it's doing. And I don't know how to make that any. I think I need to sit down with the language too to be like, to see what actually changed versus what's in the Constitution and what's here, to really understand like what it seems to be doing, because that seems to be the fuzzy part.
Yeah, we should definitely reach out to the writer of this proposal.
Yeah. That's one of the things that these meetings that we're having now can really solve. Is like, oh wait, we all 30 of us or however many of us signed this and said, yeah, let's move it to convention. But now we're sort of like, wait a minute, what is it? Oh, okay.
Well, the thing is about the signatures, though, like, I wasn't necessarily signing everything that I agreed with. I was signing things that I wanted to know more about,
Yeah, and then eventually I got to the point where I was just like, oh my goodness, like I'm on overload. So it just was like, I just want to hear it all, but that means, now we have like 130 proposals or whatever it is.
Right.
I did just hear that they've gotten it all the way down to like 82, I think.
Wow.
They're definitely chipping away at combining them, streamlining them, but that's still a lot.
Oh, so that's after consolidation.
That's partway through consolidation, yeah.
Wow.
And as a layperson, can someone, I guess, detail to me like that process and who is involved in kind of putting them all together?
Absolutely. So all of us delegates had an opportunity to write these amendments or resolutions. We had a window of time where we had to get the right amount of signatures. If you got the right amount of signatures, then it was going to go forward. So there were 130-ish at that point. Then there was a group of delegates and council members and staff, I think, that was the resolution committee. And so they then took all of those, combed through them, categorized them, and started reaching out to people saying, hey, these 3 resolutions are really similar. We want to offer you the opportunity to work together and combine these and create one unified resolution moving forward. Nobody had to take up on that offer. They could stay with what they had originally written, but they were given the opportunity to combine. And apparently so far, enough people have taken them up on that we're down to 82 or something like that. And I know that there is more work happening to try and consolidate, combine, and really, because as we talked about in the last episode, we only have 7 minutes to debate each of these. So the more that we can combine, the more that there's a little bit of, I mean, I don't know, this is me speaking, but maybe there's a little bit of squish room with that conversation time, or maybe more of them get to the floor, right? Because even with the 7 minutes, we weren't guaranteed that each one was going to have discussion time on the floor.
Well, and I think that we were very interested in having everybody's voices heard, and that was sort of the whole point of the delegation. So it felt hard to exclude any of these proposals. And so even though we've sort of relegated ourselves to now what hopefully is 8 minutes per proposal, that's certainly not a lot of time to get substantive conversation dedicated to all of these things. But that's part of why Ryan suggested we pull together these discussions, because it gives us a chance to have this, debate about it, or discussion about it, and then we can feel more confident when we go in there, so we can use our 7 to 8 minutes wisely.
Well, even just now, like with the Second Amendment, I feel like we were kind of parsing it out and figuring it out, and a little bit fuzzy in some ways, but it just gives you all the tools to now kind of go in and help the fellow delegates and to talk and be a little bit more concise and quicker with it, given the time constraints.
And also too, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but the 11 to 6 that we have on all 3 days, those are 4 business hours. What was that whole thing that Susan was talking about? Like if a vote, I don't know, like 11 to 6 is like, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but basically, like, we have 11 to 6 to get everything in there. And if something doesn't get finished, then we can't like roll it over to the next day.
Exactly.
Like yeah.
Yes.
It was sort of confusing, but also basically she was trying to say, if you don't get this in between the hours of 11 a.m. and 6 p.m., it's not moving. Nothing is happening with this proposal.
Yeah, because they'll be creating a schedule for us, right, of what we're going to be hitting every day. And according to what they were telling us before, according to the Constitution Convention rules as they stand, right, if we do not get to a proposal on the day that it was scheduled, then it does not roll over automatically to another day.
Right.
All right. Number 3. It is Delegate Replacement, and the makers are Carolyn Fast, Ife Butler, Wydetta Carter, and Sarah Labar. The Constitution currently addresses how to handle a delegate's absence from convention. Their vote is reallocated, but not how to replace a delegate if they are no longer able to hold their elected position. And this has recently come up. One of the elected central regional delegates is now a counselor, so they become a counselor delegate, and there is no one to replace them as a delegate at the convention for the central region. This resolution seeks to provide a procedure for replacing delegates when a position becomes open between election cycles by offering the position to the runner-up, whoever received the next highest number of votes, and just continuing down the line, kind of a succession type thing.
Can I add some extra context?
Sure.
So something to think about is, when it's not this year, but I'm sure it's even going to happen this year. The convention's over 3 days. There are going to be people who have a show and won't be able to be there for either part of a day or the full day. And so they've created a system to allow for that without having to like fly someone else in, because that one person can't make the day, or they book a job and they have to miss the convention. So, for instance, there's 35 Eastern Principal delegates. I just know that number. So each of us, if all of us are there and we're all there, we each get 1 vote. But let's say only half of us were there, which doesn't math out because you can't have 35, but you get my point. Each of us would actually get 2 votes, because the 35 votes for the 35 positions are shared from whatever number of people are there. So if
so it's like 35 is 35, no matter what.
no matter how many people attend. So if there was one person, this is the easy way to say it, there's just one person, all the other 34 principal delegates got stuck on a flight or something. I don't know. They got food poisoning. That one delegate would then get 35 votes from their one say. And so that was intended initially to be used in this kind of situation, or to be used if something comes up and someone has to work. So there's technically already something in place for this. To a certain extent, but I don't say that to speak for or against the motion, just to give some added context.
And I think if I'm reading right, there is a provision to reallocate the vote. So if you know that you aren't going to be there, you can give someone your voting power. This is specifically for someone who may have been deceased, right? Or like this counselor who's taking a different position, so they cannot be both at once.
That's only for liaison delegates. So
Okay.
It gets confusing. So there's 100 regional delegates from East, Central, West, and then there's the 28 liaison delegates from the liaison cities. If one of them is not present, they gift their vote to a different liaison city.
Okay.
So it's different. If you're in the regions, one of the 3 regions, then yours just goes into the pool for the rest of the delegates from your region and job category. If you're from a liaison city, your vote you give to another liaison city delegate.
And I think the intention of that, right, is that if 5 of your Eastern principal delegates don't show up, the Eastern region is still as equally represented in votes in comparison to the Central or Western. With liaison cities, the idea is that there are certain issues that are very specific to liaison cities as non-office cities. And so that vote you can choose to give to another liaison delegate. I believe you might be able to choose to give it to a different delegate as well, but others are just automatically allocated. But I think what this resolution is about is if that position is then just vacant. Like if after the first convention, someone decides, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I'm not a delegate anymore. And there's just not a delegate for the next year. What happens to that position? Does it just stay empty? This is trying to fill that position again?
Yeah, this one feels like a no-brainer to me. It seems like I'm surprised that there wasn't already a system in place for a situation like this.
I agree. I think, yeah, give it to the runner-up. Why not?
Yeah.
I was going to say, Robert, are you actually surprised?
No, I mean, to be fair, this is the first time that we're doing the convention, so these types of things are going to come up, and so it's great that someone was able to spot this ahead of time and say, hey, this has come up and will continue to come up in the future. So let's
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, another reason why I'm very, very much for this is that this experience has been like so much about the people you share the experience with. You know, like the relationships all of us have formed and how that's going to play into the discussions and conversations that happen going into convention. And also the ability for us to lobby for things. I mean, think about, Robert was talking earlier about when his amendment really needed more signatures, his personal relationships with different people that he's built, those people were able to go out and champion him. And we all do that for each other at different times. And so, you know, especially in the central and western regions where there's a smaller pool of people and fewer, well, not a smaller pool necessarily, fewer actually elected delegates, being down one central delegate or one western delegate gives, even though you get the votes, you don't get the human, you don't get the person, you don't get that relationship, you don't get that connection, you don't have that one more person on your team ready and willing to like speak and collaborate and all those things. And so I think this is really, really smart because it's not really about votes, it's about people.
Yeah, and if what we're doing is about inclusion, we might as well include more people when we get the chance.
2 points. I think that, you know, one of the arguments that this resolution makes is that there is delegate work to be done outside of just voting at convention. I think that's a whole topic that we could all go into about what are those responsibilities outside of voting at convention that's not outlined, and that's kind of, to some extent, each of our interpretation. But also to pull out Heather's comment in the feed, for positions that ran unopposed, that is also covered in this amendment, or yes, amendment, a way to find a replacement if there isn't a runner-up. If it was just a single person, how do you still have a plan in place to replace that? Sorry.
And that's important because a couple of positions, well, I forget which one they were. I think it might have been like Eastern Chorus and Western Stage Manager. I might be pulling those out of my butt, but there were 2 positions where there weren't enough people to fill the spots. So those positions are down a spot. So theoretically, this would also happen if there just wasn't a spot filled because there weren't enough nominations, which again is, I think, beneficial to everyone involved. Like, more people is great.
I'm pretty sure Eastern Chorus, actually, there was only one person who didn't get elected, unfortunately.
Clarification, Heather.
Yeah, Heather Brose is saying some delegates ran unopposed as well, so there's no second place. And then she says Western Course is the one that had
Right.
one down.
And I know quite a few of the liaison city positions ran unopposed.
Here's hoping that now that the positions of delegates are a little bit more solidified, I guess I should say, or, you know, now that we've kind of paved the way. I don't want to like tout what we've done, you know, it's just we were the guinea pigs, so that was what was going to happen, right? But hopefully when the next election comes around, I think more people will get to actually say, oh, this job plays to my strengths, or this position plays to my strengths, right? You know, like I didn't know back when I was running for this that I was going to be writing a proposal. I never would have thought that was something I was going to do, you know?
And look at you now, Robert.
Well, it is really changing the culture, I have to say. I know I said it before, but like so many of us for decades were just like, good, let those counselors just do it.
Absolutely.
So I can go work, because I don't want to get in the room and deal with the bureaucracy. But now we have a whole different attitude toward it. And I think that these Zoom meetings have really helped with that, with feeling like we have equal access. And I think that's a really big deal. So I do think that more and more people will see this as a way to have a voice, whereas for years and years it was hard to know where to put your voice.
Well said. That's it for me. Does anyone else have any questions or anything else that they want to discuss? Thank you all for your participation. We will be doing these chats all week up until it is up until the convention, right? Different topic every day. Tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central, and on the agenda is a couple more amendments, and then talking about international artists, some resolutions talking about international artists. So tune in if you are available. Thank you all for coming. It was really nice to meet all of you. I feel like I've seen these videos and seen some of you, so it's great to actually have a conversation. So
yeah, thank you,
Thanks,
Michael.
Michael.
And before
Great
we
job.
go, if there are any members that are interested in moderating and hosting one of these conversations in the coming days, please, you know, shoot us an email. Yeah, we'd love to have you.
great.
Yes.
Take care, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.